Look, hi everyone. Welcome and thanks for being here. I'm Laurel McLay and I'm here with the wonderful Lynnaire Johnston. We're both here in gorgeous Otapoti, Dunedin. And for the next while, we're going to be talking about something that we think matters more than ever, which is champion your people. Quick bit of housekeeping. This is a conversation. It's not a lecture. So rather than having like a Q&A at the end, we can say if a question pops up, just ask. Don't sit on it. We're going to record this. So you're going to get that afterwards. So the question we're here for is, should you help your people be seen, visible, growing out there, or are you just training them up? Not just training them up for the next competitor, but putting them out there in the stratosphere to say, hey, look how fantastic my people are. Well, it's a genuine fear and it does deserve a proper answer. So Lynnaire's going to take the outside story, being visible and being found. I'll start off with the inside one, seeing and championing the whole person. By the end, you'll have a simple way to do both. So for those who don't know me, I have had 20 years. I've been helping peoples and teams understand how they work differently and then work with each other's preferences, primarily in the engineering and infrastructure space. I have such a soft spot there. But I'm also enjoying giving them profiling tools that give them really meaningful data so they can see the value and on so many levels of communicating powerfully. So the whole thing about why I'm here today is helping people be seen and feel valued for who they are. And that's the inside of championing people, which we're going to start with. But I'd love to introduce Lynnaire, who we met actually during COVID days. And it's been great. This is our first session that we're delivering together. So Lynnaire, over to you.
Thank you, Laurel. Hi, everybody. Special shout out to my friend Meryl Cass from New Jersey. Hi, Meryl. Meryl's the person who always supports events that we do, and we're always very grateful, Meryl. So thank you. And to everyone else who has joined us today. We've put everybody on to mute and taken videos off just for now, but we will allow you to have a chat with us or come back on video later on once we have finished talking. But I am an executive visibility strategist, so I work with people all around the world who are senior professionals and who want to be seen online. So generally that's around LinkedIn, which is the world's best social media platform for business, in my view. And I help them to be seen by people on LinkedIn, but also by the AI. I'll be talking a bit more about that shortly, but I'm the author of Linkability, 4 Powerful Strategies to Maximize Your LinkedIn Success, the co-author of Business Gold, the world's only book about LinkedIn company pages, and I am the host of the very new podcast, the Visibility Advantage podcast, which you can see wherever you get your podcast. So I'm really pleased to have a chance to discuss this topic today, Laurel, because it's one that I get asked all the time, where people find that their employers are not terribly keen for them to be visible online. And as you can imagine, I think that's a very good thing indeed. But as you have already said, let's start from the inside and build that first.
Thank you, Lynnaire. And that's great that we've got this absolute wealth of knowledge that you have. And certainly when I look at LinkedIn or I do an AI search on someone, I can see that it's going to LinkedIn before anything else. So now more than ever, this matters. And so really champion your people, seeing the whole person and seeing people thrive. So let's start with the inside bit. And I'm just checking my tech here. There we go. Right. So the whole you, look, it matters more than ever now because I think we've just got to name it. There are so many people dealing with exhaustion. I am doing some work around signal and the noise, around people being biology first. We're not just robots. And when we do any kind of pre-questionnaires to find out how people are feeling, it just seems to be a typical response, which is, I am just so tired. And I think we've got to stop expecting ourselves and our teams to run like machines. We are living people, we've got feelings, values, and if we feel like we're not seen for that, our mental health can really suffer. And so every person carries a whole life with them. It's your passions, it's your worries, it's your beliefs, experiences, upbringing. And when someone isn't performing at their best, we don't think it's a motivational problem. The tank is just empty. And so champion your people starts here, seeing the whole person, not just the professional mask. And I'm working with a wonderful flow specialist called Simon Mackenzie Nixon. And he put this in his recent peak performance blog, and I loved it. So let's talk about someone called Olivia. So there's two versions of Olivia. Olivia A runs hard Monday to Friday. She's hyper equipment. She's hyper, sorry, efficient. She quit the gym, I don't know, 6 months ago. She hasn't skied in 2 years. And she just basically focuses on work because that's what she thinks it's all about. So version 2 or version B of Olivia is that same demanding week, but she fiercely protects her Saturday morning, her mountain biking. She's a mediocre but enthusiastic skier, and she picks up the guitar from time to time. She's not that good. And I think that what we are getting to understand more than ever now that we have this wonderful ability into looking at neuroscience is that this useless stuff isn't useless. There's a great word called autotelic, which is about something that's being done for its own sake, and the doing is the reward. Now, what happens is that means that it actually provides you with a source of flow. And so Olivia B, her biking, her skiing, her not great guitar, train the flow state that shows up at work. And we call this cross-domain flow transfer. Olivia A has stripped out everything useless, and that's really lost her the fuel of high performance. So this is a key aspect of looking at the whole you versus your job role. And I don't know how many of you come from my generation, but the seen and not heard, don't be a show off, players for kids. And that's a lot of the script that we were raised on. And this is conditioning. We know that conditioning can be unlearned. And sometimes the more senior we get, the more we treat play as optional. And that's when that high flow leisure that you cut degrades your operating system that we need you to be able to operate on to do your job. And it is really the same wiring as command and control, old conditioning showing how you treat your own life. But this is really something that we want to get you to understand how that can change. And so just quickly for my session today, we're going to talk about seeing the whole person, championing them, and then future-proofing yourself and them. So what lights people up? And when I'm hosting workshops, usually with engineers, we do a assessment on their creativity versus their practical. And we look at that both inside and out of work. And some of the most practical individuals can be completely creative in their own life. They share about their poetry, their woodworking, watercolor artistry. I know someone who ran an entire netball community, and this is their hidden whole selves. And it's a nod to that autotelic activity that I just mentioned. But what about the transferable skills? What about the fundraiser who really knows how to make invitations? Or someone who's just like a real life Ted Lasso who could bring some coaching? And these are transferable skills that the organization can use. So we think that it's good for people to name and actually share with their teammates what they do in their spare time. And ask about their purpose. Are there any causes or charities? Some of the most amazing, helpful people that I know keep themselves a bit hidden. And again, it's a bit of a hangover from this command and control, but we can treat private lives as off limits. But that doesn't apply anymore because we do think that silence breeds fear, not safety. And so in other team days, we'll go around the table and share what's going on, one thing that's going on in our life. So it might be someone who's dealing with their elderly father needing care, or someone whose son's just off overseas on a basketball scholarship, someone renovating a yacht and that's taking forever. But that whole thing is when people share and understand a bit more about that whole person, it moves from fear to trust. And loneliness and mental health are so massive, particularly for people who are new to a city or a country. How they're wired. We talk about preferences, not strengths. That's what I love about the TMP profiling system that I use, because you practice what you prefer, so you become more proficient. And you want a job based on your preferences, not your strengths, which might not be the same thing. So, for example, I know so many people who are spreadsheet ninjas. They just understand spreadsheets so well and they can whip them up and make them control everything that they need to have. And they can do it pretty well. But they often are the ones who don't actually like spreadsheets at all. They've only done it to make their lives easier. But guess what? They become the go-to person in the organization for creating spreadsheets and end up doing more of what they just don't enjoy. So preferences show how they best work and how they also communicate. And this really helps in reducing friction with the highly principled version of yourself who won't budge on a stand, or the extrovert who can't shut up, or the introvert who never speaks. And so what happens when we look at how they're wired is we're giving a team a code for understanding how each other likes to work and accepting it. In a recent workshop, there was two people in the workshop that the manager had really shared concerns with me at the beginning about they're on opposite sides of the wheel and they were of this preferences wheel. They were constantly niggling, and the whole team knew about this niggle. This totally flipped once they saw how differently they were wired, and they understood to actually see their respective preferences as a thing to support, not to move away from. And do you know what? They honestly now even have lunch together. It was like the lightness just came up, and it's just something I've seen again and again. So the second thing we want to do is look at championing them. And the first thing is to create the conditions. Happy people do better work and they're more productive. So you can create your environment and the conditions. Condition is so important for us, and none of them have to be expensive. So some of the ways that people that I work with and people I've observed do this, I don't know if any of you know about a company band. So there's a bunch of people who are in that company and they all play an instrument and they get together and play. Sometimes they perform, but more it's just about them having fun together. Some kind of a show and tell or a lunch and learn, sign language, martial arts, just share that with your colleagues. Everyone has something that they can teach, or as we talked about before, like maybe a staged cause or charity that you'd like the company to get behind. But people want to feel supported too. So there's a company here in Dunedin, Cook Brothers. I don't know if you know it. Then they have a full-time performance coach who comes from a sports background, and that person is there available for their team to talk about high performance and anything else. There's another company, Potentia. They started up their recruitment company the same time I started mine up very many years ago. And they actually include coaching someone into their new role. So if someone gets a placement through them, they coach them for the first few months. So that's really good to give them that support to get through in those sometimes a bit bewildering new days. And you want to make sure your people are equipped. So there's EAP, having something that people can go to if they're feeling that they need it. Really solid mental health policies that cover the real things, bullying, domestic violence. So many people still don't actually have these, and it's really important, not just from a legislative point of view, but from creating those conditions. Some other things you can do is let people choose their own development. Just a small annual budget that each people can spend on what they want helps them to feel that they're being like valued for who they are. Thinking about that life stage support, some people are going through fertility challenges, some people are going through menopause, elderly parents, like I've already mentioned. Now, in engineering and construction, a lot of people haven't actually talked about this, so it's a really great differentiator. And so it's definitely about thinking about that whole person. And one thing I do want to call on, because I'm really hoping that this has changed, but I'm fascinated to hear anyone's thoughts. Work drinks and offsites. They're often held as a draw card, and often a party culture can be seen as attractive, but more and more people there's this sober curious, I do not like that term, but some companies are now hosting events without alcohol. And there's a bigger change to that old everyone gets slammed default. Look, it does take a while. I know plenty of people who avoid the social occasions altogether because they're just not interested in watching everyone get blotto and quite frankly boring. And that's definitely a differentiator of creating an environment and a condition. I grew up in the 80s and my first job was in the 90s, and it was very much around you can't socialize with your boss. Actually, my brother had a job at McDonald's and they had a total policy. You could not fraternize with people you worked with. And I think we still come from that old command and control, the don't share anything about your own lives. It's very reverent mood. I mean, I worked in a department store where literally the manager was on the mezzanine floor, and they would literally look down and wander around the store very importantly, and we never dared go talk to them. And my first job, my employer was completely disinterested in who I was. I was constantly being told off about my exuberance. There were a couple of times I took sick leave, And he actually rang me back in the old landline days about 2 times during each day. Now, I could think that that was a welfare call, but it wasn't. He was just trying to check up on me. I couldn't have an outside life. Management was driven by fear, and I'm sure some of you got some examples on your own. Now, that's not how organizations thrive today. Take the risk, be vulnerable, share something real. I've been in meetings and workshops where a leader has shared a really hard personal things, and I've just seen the room shift. And actually, in this particular instance, not only did the room shift, but some other people had been through something very, very similar, and it created such a relatedness. I think we also have to smash the age stereotypes at both ends. My son, 19, is really doing well for himself as an entrepreneur, and people respect and rate him, as opposed to when I was his age, it was like, you are just the bottom of the barrel. And also with older end, experience and relevance don't expire. It's making sure that ageism is not tolerated. And this has results, right? So the Deloitte 2025 Gen Z and Millennial study say that most people in the 18 to 24 want to be authentic versus only 38% of people in the late 50s, early 60s. And people, over half a millennials can discuss personal managers with their manager. Only 24% of boomers feel. So it's just literally, it's a leadership and culture issue. We want to make sure that tolerate, we don't tolerate some of the stuff that's just been so entrenched. And that includes sharing blogs, write-ups publicly, which Lynnaire is going to obviously talk a bit more about. And they look to you. So be the first. Culture change is modeled. So why don't you consider yourself being the Olivia B version, protecting your own play and leisure, living a life out loud, telling people about it. You can't champion in others what you can't strip out of yourself. So it's really a great reason for you to go and unlearn any of that if that does apply to you. And so finally, we're going to look at future proofing. Anticipating the external change is really important right now for seeing the whole person. Because you look at civil servants in Wellington, the restructures and the cuts have just shown how fast a single identity working life can come apart. It's just moved. And so this is why a broad identity matters. If your work is your whole self and that work goes, what are you left with? And I think that's what we think that's what Champion Your People is about, is making sure they're more than the job title that they feel they need to be. And by the way, reinvention is really not expensive anymore. You should see how quickly it takes to create a website. I found that amazing. You don't have to be someone who pays a lot of money if you're looking at transitioning out. And that's something that I'm doing, which we'll share some information when we send out some stuff about AI Play, which is looking at Champion Your People bringing AI in a way that fits for them. And people's needs shift across a working life. I mean, I'm dealing with people who have got team members who are wanting to travel less because they've just had a baby. And then there's others whose kids have just left and they want to travel more. So think about all those change and think about supporting them for it. And I think something we don't talk about a lot is people heading towards retirement. And we treat them as though nothing's going to change, or we start writing them out of our future. And I mean, I turn 60 next year, and I've just been reading this great book called The 60-Something Crisis. And for the first time in my life, I'm actually planning, I'm not going to call it my retirement, I'm going to call my years up to 70, because I just totally want to make sure that I'm doing some more travel now rather than suddenly 10 years going past and I haven't traveled anymore. And so you can actually manage some of those off ramps. Like I've got a number of clients who've had their, not necessarily retirement, even if you're just turning into your own consultant business, 4 days a week, go down to 3, go down to 2, get them to turn as a consultant, but then maybe they contract back to you. And on ramps matter too. Someone coming back after illness, making sure that managed return is going to be looking at that whole person. And so I think that this is really brave for people to say that you've got people, you're not that you're encouraging people to leave, but potentially helping them. But I think it's important to note that you've got to have some fair commercials. So if you've genuinely invested in someone's development, it's okay to have a bond, because the last thing you want to do is say, yes, I'm going to help you with this, and then they don't stick to their end of the bargain. So I do think that it's important to be commercial. And of course, the privacy point has to be said, which is older people particularly may not want to share their plans. They may not want to share themselves. And that's what has obviously got to be respected. But I also think that if other people start to share, then they might not feel so resistant because they might have before just not wanted to share it because they didn't feel safe about it. So we're looking at a champion your people plan. So implement these changes and understand that this is not the normal narrative. And so that's why it's a massive advantage. Do it well and your employer brand elevates. And this is, we're just about to move into Lynnaire's work. The internal champion is the foundation for the external visibility. Encouraging your people to be visible on LinkedIn rather than just worrying about it and training them up to be a competitor. And so here's just some ideas that you could have as your checklist, and we will send you out a championing your people checklist. It's a bit hard to say. And so just make sure that that you can do something that makes a difference to champion person inside and out. And you can see there that it could be just seriously this. I've seen this in teams where people literally ask what's going on in their life, and it starts to become something that's far more accepted in the common narrative. So when you see the whole people, they feel seen. And what I'd like to do now is hand over to Lynnaire, who's going to take the external championing side.
Thank you, Laurel. And I'm with you. I grew up in the day and age where you were seen and not heard. And so there was very little opportunity for people to be the whole person inside the company. And I think that to a degree that is still the case in a lot of traditional organizations. But in this day and age, it's really important, I think, that companies understand that the world has changed. And let's look at just the massive changes been on the back of AI going mainstream in the last 18 months. When you think back earlier, say 2023, 2022, there was very little AI around. Now it is everywhere. And so I think that building visibility, trust, and reputation has changed in the modern era. And so I'd like to start with a story about Susan. We heard about Olivia from Laurel, and I'm going to talk about Susan. Now, Susan is, of course, a client who doesn't exist under that particular name, but she was somebody who I helped because she was a very clever person in the accounting field, and she recognized that AI was changing the world dramatically, and she wanted to be at the forefront of that. She still wanted to have a job in 5 years' time, and she recognized that having a good, solid understanding of AI was the way to do that. And she recognized too that the best way to learn about it was to write about it and to share what she was finding out. And she had a nice little network of people on LinkedIn that she had built up over time. So she started writing consistently, but not frequently, not every day, about what she was learning around AI and its effect on accountancy. And what happened as a result of that was that a person in her city who was a conference organizer found her using AI. They'd put in an AI query for somebody with her experience and understanding and knowledge, and she was the person who came up, and she was consequently invited to become a speaker at the conference that this person was organizing. It was a national conference, and so it was a really big deal. Now, at the same time, Susan's boss had been watching this go on, seeing Susan post more frequently on LinkedIn about her area of expertise and what she was learning. But he had a very poor profile on LinkedIn, had nothing that was current. He had really ignored it and couldn't see the value. But when he saw that Susan was building a network and that she was getting visible, people were seeing her, and that she was getting these opportunities like this conference invitation, which incidentally he did not receive, then he ordered Susan to stop posting. Dead in the water. That was it. No discussion, just stop. Well, Susan wasn't really terribly keen about this, which is an understatement. Within a month, she left the organization and she was immediately snapped up by a competitor. Now, I think it's worth remembering that Susan had put in some time to this. She'd built a network and she was well known as somebody with good experience in her area of expertise. But that was seen as a problem by her company. And this is not unusual. The fear-based logic holds a lot of companies back when it comes to LinkedIn and being visible online generally. There's a general feeling that if you develop your team members too much, too quickly, then they'll have a better profile than you on LinkedIn. And that's often the case because senior leaders do not often put a lot of time and attention into how they come across on LinkedIn, and their profiles are often not complete. They are not using current new features with LinkedIn, and their profiles don't reflect who they currently are and the work they're currently doing. Often company pages fall into the same category. They're not used very well or only to promote the company and not to be talking about staff members and their achievements, or to be, in fact, giving a much wider view of what's going on in the industry. They see their company page as having a very narrow focus indeed. So it is a fear-based thing that people might think that when you develop your team members, they will overshadow you. The second area of fear that you can see often is that people will be worried that the person who is visible online will be poached. I'll talk a bit more about this in a minute or so, but this is a very real fear for a lot of people, and they can sometimes conflate somebody leaving with this whole visibility issue, and so that does happen quite a bit. And the third thing is that if you develop your people and they become an authority in their field, they might go out on their own and then compete with you. And you certainly don't want them to be doing that if they're doing good work for you and are an excellent employee. Now, when you add all of these three things together, it sounds like prudence, doesn't it? Not to make your team members or allow your team members to be visible online. But in actual fact, that really is a slow leak, because it doesn't stop people from leaving when you muzzle them, if you like. What it does do is it guarantees that while they're with you, they'll operate at only a fraction of their potential. The best people that you have excuse me. The best people that you have will be the people who are going to be great at their jobs, but also who will be great with what they are doing online if that is something that they want to be doing. I think I should just point out at this stage, this is not a mandatory thing. Some people will want to do this, some people will not want to be doing this for some of the reasons that Laurel has already talked about. So instead of being a slow leak, let's talk about what happens when, in fact, somebody is visible online. It wasn't very long ago that LinkedIn was seen as a organization or a platform where people just went to look for jobs. Then it became a platform where people could post content, and they could build their brands that way, and they could bring in new clients. Then AI got involved, and now it has turned out that LinkedIn content and LinkedIn profiles are one of the most highly cited sources of information for questions that people ask their AIs. Now, if you're anything like me, you'll have moved away from Google search, and when you want to know about something, you'll be asking your AI how to do something, how to find about something, what you need to know about something, and how something works. Now, that's happening a lot all over the place. And that has changed very much about what is being answered, what is showing up. Now, if you want your company to show up in those AI answers, because let's face it, SEO doesn't do the job anymore, then you'll be wanting to not only have your company have a good visibility on LinkedIn, but also to be able to see your team members as an asset, because their visible expertise is what's going to be picked up by AI. Now, this is something that's only happened in the past few months. Very few people really aware that this is what is going on. But LinkedIn has now become the most cited source for many AIs and answers to business questions. And if we remember that and keep that firmly in mind, it rather changes the whole idea about people being visible. Now, another reason I think that we ought to think about this is because of how people themselves feel. And Laurel's talked a bit about that already, about the whole person and how people feel within an organization when they're able to be themselves. And this, I think, has a direct correlation to how they are championed visibly online. So the people who have their company's support will feel loyal to the company. They will bring their best selves to work. They will feel supported, they'll feel credited, and they will feel like the company is on their side. Now, that will then turn around to mean that if they walk away from that, they are walking away from a company that makes the authority that they are building possible, and they will simply not want to do that, all other things being equal. If the company culture is great, they feel like they're being rewarded financially, they feel like they're visible and they're being supported, then they are going to want to stay with the organization. Conversely, when people feel guarded, when they feel like they're not able to be visible online, and let's face it, younger people particularly are keen on this. They've grown up in the social media era, and to them it's second nature. For those of us who are a little older, it's a little harder to get our heads around. And also, some people are extroverts and very keen, other people are introverts and not quite so much. But I think that when a company guards its employees and doesn't allow them to spend time online in a really positive way that boosts the company and shows the company in a really good light, then that is saying giving really a bad message about the company, and I think people are more than inclined to go, I wonder where else I can go that might be a better possibility for me where I will be seen, because as we've already seen, Susan wasn't lost to a better offer, she was lost to being invisible. Now, any company with its salt can buy a marketing campaign and it can look very credible on the outside. But this kind of marketing these days is not nearly so successful as it once was. And that's largely due to AI. It's largely due to how people are now being found on using AI, how companies are being discovered and surfaced using AI. The game has changed dramatically in the last 18 months. And so now it's not about brands claiming expertise, it's about visible proof. This is where trust comes in, I think, and it is a complete opposite to the command and control structure that we've seen in companies for so very long, but which, as Laurel's already pointed out, is now changing. So what we are seeing is a necessity for organizations to build trust online. And you can't do that just by saying how great you are. You need that expert proof. So that's built through reputation and through the reputation of your people. So say, for example, you've employed Susan, she's got 5,000 people in her network, she's got 10 potentially good recommendations on her LinkedIn profile, and she is on the platform on a regular basis, She is commenting on the other people's posts. She's putting up a post a week herself in her area of expertise. That is building a reputation. That is building visibility, and all of that is verifiable from the outside. So that's verifiable to your clients, your potential clients, and those you may want to work with. So no marketing budget can get anywhere near that. Now, the other thing, of course, to remember is from the side of people who might want to come and work for your organization. What if they're the kind of people who like to be visible, and so they are looking at your organization and deciding whether or not they want to come and work for you? They're a talented person. They want to be visible. They want to develop their career. They want to become an authority in their own right for their longer term goals. So what happens if your company is shielding its employees and nobody can see anything about either the leaders or the employees from their area of expertise? And they decide that you aren't the right kind of fit for them because you are not supporting your experts, your employee experts in a public way. So do remember that that companies are also being looked at by candidates as potential employers, and you want to think about how that might come across. Now, all this is all very well, isn't it? But what could possibly go wrong with this one, Lynnaire? Well, let me count the ways. There are very real risks in this new strategy, and I think it's worth having a look at what those risks are and talking about them, because otherwise just trying to brush them aside isn't going to give you the ideas and suggestions that you need to be able to deal with them if this is the way that you want to proceed. Now, the first thing is about poaching, and this is the biggest fear that most companies have, is that your team members that you put out there and make them visible, they will be poached by the competition. A lot of people that I work with certainly feel that this is a very real risk if they do that. And if they pretend, if anybody's pretending otherwise, then nobody gets convinced by that one. So that's the very highest risk that people feel about this. The second one is, what if a team member is posting something that you don't agree with, that you don't like, that they shouldn't have said, that was confidential, that was off brand? How do you deal with that one? And fortunately, this is a very easy fix. It's the simplest one to in fact fix, but it is a very real risk that people are concerned about, and wisely so, in my opinion. The third thing is that being visible and developing this visibility can take time away from the actual work that has to be done. So the company needs to, if it's going to go down this road, it needs to think about how it's going to build this in, because you can't expect people to become visible in their own time if you want to make maximum advantage of that. So do think about how that might fit into the structure of a person's day if you're going to be promoting this to them as something they might want to do. Now, some people will take this on board, some people won't, and of course how people can participate in this is going to depend on their own whole person. It's going to depend on whether they like to write, whether they like to video, whether they like to talk about themselves, they want to talk about what's going on in their lives, the charities they're supporting, or the work they're doing outside their main job. So there are a lot of things to think about on this one, and it is an internal issue to deal with, because you don't want the company to be looking like it is really promoting some people publicly and not others, simply because some people are online and are visible. There are other ways to promote them internally and to champion them, and some of those Laurel's already talked about. And of course, not everybody wants to be visible online. A lot of people see LinkedIn as social media. I see it as as social media for business and a business tool, which is completely different altogether. But some people will be happy to do this, younger people generally, and some older people less so. And I think it's important that we understand that and we respect that they value their privacy and don't want to be visible online. So, how can we resolve these risks? Well, let's go back to them and deal with them one at a time. And poaching was the one at the top of the list. Of course, you might back somebody publicly, and then they might leave. Now, the people that do leave on the back of being visible online generally do not leave for only the visibility reason. They will leave because they are unhappy with other aspects of the culture of the company or the work that they are doing. They might want to be promoted and not feel that they are being given the opportunities. So it is important, I think, to recognize that the person, if they are thinking of leaving, is not necessarily doing so just because you are restricting their visibility. But it also means that when they do leave, that then another company may well be able to promote them, to support them in becoming more visible online. So do just think about how that all works. It's part of your culture. The poaching thing is not something to be seen on its own as a risk factor, I don't think. Now, I said that the off message post one was easy to fix. I do believe this. If you are to upskill your team members, give them guidelines, checklists, tell them what they can post about, be very clear about what they cannot post about. So you don't want them talking about anything that's confidential, perhaps something the company's working on. It might be a major project. So as long as they are aware of what they can talk about and you put some guardrails around that, then it's not going to be seen as gagging them. It is going to be seen as giving them an area in which they can operate. So I think that as long as you make that very clear to people and upskill them so they can do it well in a way that fits with your social media policies, then that is the best way to do that. Now, the time cost is something that, again, this is an internal issue, I believe, but you can't expect somebody to be putting time into it out of hours. You need to make it part of their role. You can make it part of a KPI, although, as I said earlier, perhaps not mandatory because some people simply will not want to do this. But you do need to allow time for people to be able to make this happen, even if it's only 10 or 15 minutes a day. With LinkedIn, it's all about consistency over time. So making some time available and encouraging people to spend time on it is a very sensible move, in my opinion. The uneven participation, some people will and some people won't. I think that celebrating contribution in its different forms is something that needs to be seen holistically within the organisation. And I think that Laurel has covered this pretty well, really. But needs to be, people need to be shown, or they need to be feel that they're supported in the different ways that they do contribute to the organisation, and visibility publicly is only one of those. So it shouldn't outweigh the people who would rather be not seen and heard. And finally, reluctance. You can't force anybody to be visible online if they don't want to be. A LinkedIn profile belongs to the person, not the company. And so if somebody does not want to do it, there's no point in trying to force them into this. You need to keep it a genuine choice for them, because they will not do it as well as you would like. They will pay lip service to it, and they'll not do themselves any favour or the organisation if you push it on people. But giving them a genuine choice, I think, is a really important thing to do. So what are 3 things you can do in the next week that really pushes this one along towards your team members who want to become visible? The first thing to do is to publicly credit one team member's work somewhere where a client could potentially see it, and that could be on your company page. Company pages are not used very well, in my opinion, and one of the ways that they could be used better is to promote what team members are doing, either on the page or supporting a team member's post by commenting on it and sharing it on the page. So if you do that, then the person is going to feel very supported and feel more loyalty, I believe, towards the organisation. So publicly crediting a team member's work is the first thing you could do this week. The second thing is ask some your team members who actually wants this. As I said, I don't think this should be mandatory. It needs to be something that people are keen to do because they want their visibility to grow online, because they can see the value in that both now and in the future. And ask them what kind of visibility they want, because there are plenty of choices to be visible online, and LinkedIn isn't even the only place where that can happen. And the final thing here is to give them the guardrails. Write down and give them guidelines about what they can talk about and what they can't. And this list will actually be a lot shorter than you might first think or fear, because really you will be wanting them to talk about their areas of expertise, perhaps not necessarily about the company, because you might have some policies that don't allow that, but just make sure that they are very clear on what they do write about and what they can be talking about. And so that's it. And so I'm just going to leave you with this question, whether your organization is championing its people or it's quietly holding them back. And I think that's a very real question in this day and age, with visibility the way it is, AI the way it is. Laurel, and you and I have both seen that happen in both our work, haven't we? How AI has changed everything that we are doing. So I'm really happy for us to take any questions that there might be, or for Laurel to pick this up and move this conversation forward from here.
Thank you, Lynnaire. Look, what I loved about what you just shared then was you kind of called the elephant in the room. Hate that's such a cliche thing to say, but that is it. I mean, the fact is there are risks, and I think there are risks in some of the other stuff that I talked about too. But it just really is about making sure that you've got buy-in from the people who count, and if you haven't, that you just quietly start showing it yourself. And I mean, the thing for me is just that whole stuff around how incredible AI is at looking at people who are out there prolifically profiling and doing things like that. So yeah, thank
I
you.
think it's important too, Laurel, to think, from my part, from the external part, to switch it on its head for a moment and talk about what it is like to be the person who's in the company and wants to be visible, but isn't being allowed to be visible. Because I think that it's useful for those people to have a few ideas around that as well. And I'm sure that you'll have some suggestions internally, but I would just suggest, as a starting point for people who do want to improve their visibility online and they may not get the buy-in from their company, is just to start with their LinkedIn profile. Now, nobody these days thinks that updating your LinkedIn profile means you are going to leave. That was a very old-fashioned version of a way to look at LinkedIn. Now it's important that people keep their profile up to date over time, add in new milestones, new things they're learning, new certifications. There are a lot of features that people don't generally use on LinkedIn now, and I think it's important for people to grow their networks, and to do that they need to be having a profile that really reflects who they are currently and what they are doing. So that is my major tip for anybody who wants to become more visible online and is not sure what their company is going to think about them doing that, is to start with their LinkedIn profile. So Laurel, have you got any suggestions for people from the inside of
I
a
think the
company?
only thing is to not buy into the stereotypes.
Mm.
So often people think that the people who are out there blogging about whatever it is in their life or even something in their work are the people who want to be the presenters or the speakers. And one of my favorite books, I'm sure I've mentioned it to you before, Lynnaire, which is called Quiet by Susan Cain. And it's talking about, a guide to introverts in a world where people can't stop talking about themselves. And it talks about the leadership of people who are quiet and how really great leaders are made. Introverts make very great leaders. And often it's the dominant voices that get the attention. And so I think sometimes introverts, even though they might be very great writers, to think, oh, that's not for me. I'm not very showy. But it's about but coaching yourself and understanding that this is a really great way that you can quietly and powerfully influence.
I agree with that. And I think part of the issue for a lot of organizations is the speed at which things are changing, Laurel, right? And younger people see things very differently these days, but the leaders of companies are generally older people. So you've got a very big divide between how people see visibility, I think. And a lot of leaders have grown up in the era where you got a new job by word of mouth, and it's the old boys network. There's another cliche for you.
Yeah.
That's how business gets done. Whereas these days it gets done in a completely different way. And having a large network of people that you can call on, get to know, learn from over time, I think is becoming increasingly important. Look, our networks have always been important, but post-COVID, those
Yeah.
networks have gone online largely. And so building those networks up with people that are not necessarily just in your city or even in your country, but building networks up with people who are overseas, I think is a very good thing to be doing. And LinkedIn's a great place to learn from others. So reaching out to people who might be heavyweights in your industry and suggesting that you might want to learn from them and be active in their networks, I think is a very good way to just quietly become visible online without people getting too concerned that you might be overstepping. So yeah, it's a really interesting topic, and I could talk about this all day.
But one thing I just wanted to touch on that someone sent me as a private question was just, we've got to face the facts is that there are still a bunch of command and control managers out there, and some of them will never accept, for example, that their young people shouldn't be treated like, pretty badly. And I think the whole thing's about that is you just don't start with them. You start with the managers who are already curious, the ones open to learning differently, and let them show what it looks like. I've often found, especially dealing in sort of that engineering market that I do, is that sometimes the most grumpy, set in their ways people can end up being your greatest advocates. And the amount of times, like, for example, when we've done the profiling systems, like, oh, I really wasn't looking forward to this, but actually this has been really useful. And so if they could just, again, there's no point trying to dominate and insist that this gets done. But we think that culture moves through the willing, not the resistant. But if you do get the resistant on board, that can be a really great influence, right?
Absolutely. And I just love the way that things are moving now because with technology and the availability of AI to anybody who wants to try it out, it means that the playing field has become a lot more level and people can be doing more things publicly, also in their own lives. That really, I think companies, if they were awake to the opportunities and they saw people as an asset in this
Yeah.
way, then we would be seeing a lot more people being visible online and promoting their organizations because I think that people build up a reputation through their LinkedIn profile, through their network, and those are the things that make it a really good make a person a really good asset for an organization, Laurel. So yeah, I'm just, as I say, really enthused about this particular topic. Now, I have allowed people to unmute and to put their videos on if they wish to, and to ask any questions. I haven't spotted anything in the chat, but we will give you a moment if you would like to do that. And we will be providing some material on the back of this, Laurel. I'll put together a bullet point summary of the things we've talking about. And I know that you had something that you wanted to give to people who registered for today as well.
Yeah, I just think it's like really good to have a checklist. We'll send out the recording and the summarized version, but also just a checklist so that it's always quite good for other people who didn't come along today and people who couldn't make today to have something which is just, honestly, the way that I've seen this change cultures in people I've worked with, companies I've worked with, where it's okay. And I think that's the whole thing. And that's a lot where, some of these like, are you okay movements out of the Australia, for example, talk about it's not my job to ask what's going on. And when people realize that actually it's all right to have that, and actually Hannah, I see, you and I have worked at the same company who did the green, orange, red, and it was like it became this narrative that you could just wander up and say, hey, how are you, Lynnaire? And you could say, actually, I'm feeling pretty red today, and even orange. It's like, okay, well, that's fine. And I think that just it's incredible how some of these initiatives can really help change and shift and seeing people, like I say, not just as machines anymore. But there's a couple of us, here in this call that remember when we were machines and we were expected to be machines. But I think the one thing I'd just like to finish is that sometimes it's ourselves, and think about that Olivia example. No one's asking us to be a machine. We actually put that pressure on ourselves. And I think that's a really important thing to consider as well, is it's like we wouldn't dare ask someone whether we could blog or whether they're interested in supporting our our own stuff that we're doing online. So yeah, just think that often the person that's putting the most pressure on ourselves is ourselves.
That's a very good note to leave this on, Laurel. So I'd just like to thank everyone who has joined us live today. And if you are watching the replay of this, please, Laurel and I are both open to discussions about the content of today's presentation. We trust that you will be connected to both of us on LinkedIn. If not, let's rectify that. And I know that both Laurel and I are keen to have discussions with anybody who would like to as a follow-up to this, because we think this is an important issue that needs to be discussed more widely. So I'd like to thank everybody who is in the audience today, and thank you very much to Meryl Cass for bringing people along. And I'd also like to say thank you to Laurel. It's been a pleasure working with you on this, and I hope we're going to do it again soon.
Back at you, Lynnaire. Great that we finally got the opportunity, and thank you for being so professional and prepared. It just does make such a difference.
Well, thanks everybody, and
Hey,
it was
everyone.
great to see you. Bye for now.